Hey guys, and welcome back to Rush Royale, and today we are going to be doing a deck with one of the newer cards that I've obtained, the Shaman, and this deck is going to really focus around using the Harlequin with the Engineer to copy the Engineer in order to create a strategy with the Engineer and more easily be able to get Engineers out there. I previously had the Portal Keeper in this deck, but I ended up realizing that I don't really need the Portal Keeper, and that Harlequin is actually a much better card to have in here. Shaman also works well because it allows me to disrupt what my opponent's doing, and that's really the strategy, it seems, with Shaman, is just to disrupt what your opponent is doing. And then, of course, Priestess works well to get me more mana, and all of those things combined can give me an edge over my opponent. And then, of course, the Wind Archer is just simply for some extra DPS. At least at the time of this video, I did not have Boreas, so Wind Archer was what I opted to go for to help fill that hole a little bit. Could have gone for another support card, but what I found was when I tried to incorporate more support cards, what ended up happening was that they just wouldn't... I didn't have enough DPS. If I didn't get the Engineer, then I didn't really have cards that could do enough DPS. For example, if I tried to put the Vampire where the Wind Archer is, it would end up with a lot more matches where I would lose near the start because I didn't have enough damage being done at the start, especially if I did not get those Engineers at the start. So the Wind Archer is just basically a backup option to help early on with extra damage. And just, you know, I've sort of found that I feel like I want to at least have at least two damage cards in each deck. I wouldn't really consider the Shaman or the Priestess or the Harlequin by themselves to be damage cards. They're really more support cards. And because of that, they're not going to, they're not going to do the brunt of the work to win you the match. They're just there to provide extra, extra bonuses. So, as you can see, even without the Portal Keeper, I'm actually still doing all right in regards to the Engineers. And the great thing about the Harlequin is that it allows me to keep my board from getting bricked in that regard, and usually I can still find a way to link up the Engineers because of the Harlequin, and that really, really helps out. So here we have Bedlam. Bedlam, definitely an issue for Engineer decks, that's for sure, although clearly the best thing to do is to simply take out Bedlam very quickly. As you can see, this is performing reasonably well, and I kind of just spread things out and go for whatever. I just sort of merge whatever and try to focus on getting the Engineers. That's pretty much what this is based around, and because I have the Wind Archer in there as well, it really gives me the extra DPS to be more consistent than, for example, my opponent's Inquisitor deck. If they make one false move, a lot of their damage, a lot of their DPS is gone. And while that can sort of be true if I unlink my Engineers, the Wind Archers at least help to provide some extra DPS, which I think is pretty critical. I think you really got to have at least 2 damage cards in your deck, because if you only have 1 damage card and then 4 support cards, it really just gets a little too hard to actually, consistently get a good start to matches. And you don't want to be one of those people where, you put out your cards and you get like 4 cards in a row that don't do any damage at all, basically, and then you lose right at the start of the match, because that's just not any fun. And yeah, 2 tier 3 Engineers here to start this out, pretty efficient. The only wasted card here is pretty much the tier 3 Shaman. I found that the Shaman is actually even more crazy if you use, There's some other strategies you can use as well to kind of build up cards that you can merge with Shaman. And if you sort of build up the different cards you can merge with it, you can really start to spam the Shaman. And that can be pretty interesting as well. So obviously the big tactic against the Shaman is that if your opponent is on the ball enough, they can actually dodge the Shaman by merging when they see the Shaman's animation flying through the air. And if they do that, then they can avoid the Shaman altogether. Although it can still have an effect on your opponent, because the reality is it can force them to merge things that they weren't necessarily planning to merge at that moment. And if they get a bad merge out of it, it could still go in your favor. The Shaman is definitely one of the better cards I've used in Rush Royale in terms of really disrupting what your opponent's doing. I mean, it's one of the only cards that can really disrupt it in such a direct way. And I think that definitely has a lot of merit in a lot of different types of decks. And that's one of the big pros of using the Shaman in a deck, and why it works so well, because it can really put pressure on your opponent, especially if your opponent happens to be using a deck that relies very heavily on certain cards in a certain, order, like the Engineer deck, an Engineer deck would, or an Inquisitor deck needing an exact number of cards in order to deal the highest amount of damage. And even losing your Inquisitor sort of combo for even a smaller amount of time could be very detrimental to your deck's success. So from that perspective, a Shaman could be very useful, especially in the early to mid game. It could really disrupt things. In the later game, people may be so set up that the Shaman may not be as disruptive. But it's also possible to, like I said before, do combos where you use cards like the Mime or, Dryad or Harlequin in order to maximize the number of Shamans that you can get out there, and therefore be able to take out quite a number of opponents' units, and that can be a difference maker. Especially, again, depending on what type of strategy they have and at what stage in the match it's at, that can be a pretty big difference maker. I was really appreciating Harlequin with Engineer, though. Previously, I just had like Mime with Engineer or Portal Keeper with Engineer, and I was really appreciating Harlequin. I really was making Engineer deck a lot easier to set up, and that was pretty big. So I thought that was a good thing. I thought that was pretty good to have, and yep, this match here, closing this one out despite the fact that I did not even have the Engineers linked up. It is harder to link them up without Portal Keeper, but the reality is I found that this is still a more effective method than... I like this strategy better than Portal Keeper, just because with Portal Keeper, I mean, if you don't need to be moving things around, it's not the most useful card ever. And at least with Shaman, while Shaman isn't super useful other than its ability is so useful that it's still a valuable addition. So yeah, now I'm starting to lose this match a bit, so I'm like, well, I have to step this one up because they got their Inquisitor formation back together, which, Inquisitor is so back and forth, it's really a roller coaster ride of matches. I do like how interactive it is, from a play standpoint. It's not a super AFK deck, so if I feel like playing more being more engaged in my gameplay, Inquisitor is definitely a nice change of pace in that regard. But it's also just super risky, and you can see right here, I am about to lose this match, unfortunately, because I did not merge well enough. Is really what it is. I wasn't able to get my Engineers linked up, and while that didn't matter at the start, I was finally able to do it there, but will it be enough? 7 seconds left. Can I actually do this? Wow, that was quite the save. I really, really thought I was going to lose that match right there. That was quite the save, guys. Quite the save on that round. But the reality was I just hadn't merged as much as I should have been. And I have to keep up with that DPS my opponent's putting out. So I will most definitely have to do some more merging here, as I realized, in order to keep up. That was a good Shaman, I think. Reducing some of that Inquisitor DPS, potentially. So I'll probably just try and focus on the sort of outside engineers like I did right there. That didn't really pan out, but it was still a good effort. I'm trying to think about how I can do this here because my board did get kind of messed up a little bit. But I was able to copy that tier 3 engineer, which was pretty big. And now my board is starting to look better. Well, maybe not tons better, but the extra tier 3 engineer was definitely appreciated. And I'm being able to unbrick it a little bit and get a... Well, I don't know if the tier 4 Wind Archer was the best play there, or if copying another tier 3 engineer would have been better. It's looking like that might have been the better move, but... Bedlam in 13 seconds. Is this going to work out, guys? I could end up losing this right here. This is really close. It looks like I'm going to pull off hanging in this round. But Bedlam could spell doom for, honestly, either of our decks is the thing, because Inquisitor is highly susceptible to Bedlam as well. Let's see what happens to them. I think they delayed it because they were stunning Bedlam, maybe, but yeah, they got messed up by Bedlam. But so did I. However, I have the extra hearts, so in this case, should benefit me. And there we go, picking up a win there. Hard-fought match. Came down to the fact that I had those extra hearts when we hit Bedlam. So again, you know, the engineer is pretty solid in terms of the DPS department, but I'm getting beat by my opponent right now because they have 2 tier 3 engineers, and I have a tier 3 jester, but I really got to start merging here. So I opt to go for the Shaman, and I get a tier 4 Wind Archer, which isn't horrible, but the problem once again is that I need to link these engineers, so I go ahead and do that. That keeps me in the match at least. But obviously I'm behind in the DPS department. I think despite having my engineers linked up, just because they have those, well, now they only have 1 tier 3 engineer. So let's see what's going to happen here. Now, this is looking better for me. It's looking better, but I think they still have more merged cards than I do. So we're going to have to see how this pans out. I took out Gorgon okay. So next, unfortunately, we have Bedlam. That probably works in their favor since they aren't linked up. Probably a better chance that they will get linked up and I'll get unlinked with my engineers. So I'm concerned about that. That's for sure. But I guess I'll just kind of wait and see how it plays out. Yeah, trying to merge some stuff up here. I don't know if that was the best decision or not. Because, as you can see, I'm still behind them. I still seem to be losing. So I realize here I have to merge some things together. And the merging isn't going super well. I got some more mana, but I'm still in kind of bad shape here. Still losing this match and not really entirely sure what to do about it. So I decided to merge the Shamans together, but it's still not really helping. I kind of need some higher tier options for the engineer. So I merged that priestess together and was able to get some good mana out of that, but I'm still not really getting DPS cards, which is the problem here. And as you can see, I just got some bad merges down the stretch, And unfortunately, it lowered the DPS of my engineers, and that was the end of that. But still, mostly I found that deck to be pretty consistent, especially in the early game. So, yeah, that was my little engineer shaman deck that I've been using, and I'm really enjoying Rush Royale right now. So I'm going to keep hopefully making some videos about this game as well. So leave a like if you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought about this video in the comments and what other types of content I should create, or if you have any tips for me. Maybe subscribe if you're new to my channel. And thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned for more videos.